Good day, class. How are you today? Okay, good. Before I start my lesson, I have a question to you, class. What comes into your mind when you see a burger? Okay, so if we see a burger, we lay our eyes on it, we smell the bacon, our mouth gets watery, and then we're going to taste it, swallow it, and digest it in our stomach. So that process comes from the cranial nerves. So our lesson for today is about the brain and the cranial nerves. So the cranial nerves have 12 parts. It consists of motor fibers and sensory fibers. Now I will share my screen to you, class.
Cranial nerves. We have the part of it and its function, though it is numbered in Roman numeral. First, we have the olfactory nerve, which is the sense of smell. Second is the optic nerve, which is the vision, the sense of sight. The third is the oculomotor, which is the eye movement, supplies motor input to our eyelid muscles and facilitates pupillarity constriction. Fourth, the trochlear nerve, which is the eye movement also. It innervates the extraocular muscles that allow us to move our eyes. Fifth, the trigeminal nerve. It is a masticator movement and the facial sensation. So we have three branches of it, the ophthalmic, maxillary, and the mandibular. Six, the abducens nerve, which is the eye movement. Seven, facial nerve, which is the facial movement and sensation. Innervates the muscles of facial expression and carries some taste sensation. 8. Vestibulocochlear nerve. It is the hearing and balance. The vestibular component carries information on balance, while the cochlear component enables hearing. 9. Glossopharyngeal nerve, which is the tongue and pharynx movement. Carries some taste sensation as well as ants and pulses of salivary glands. 10th, vagus nerve. Heart, blood vessels, viscera movement of larynx and pharynx. Carries most of the parasympathetic motors of the organ of the thorax and the abdomen. 11th, spinal accessory nerve, which is the neck muscle. This nerve supplies somatic motor innervation of the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid muscles. 12. Hypoglossal, which is the tongue muscle. Olfactory nerves, oculomotor, trochlear, abducens, vestibulocochlear, hypoglossal, cranial accessory, vagus, glossopharyngeal, facial, trigeminal, and the optic nerve. So these are the 12 parts of the cranial nerves. Now, let's proceed to the brain organization. Cerebral cortex receives sensory information and send message to move skeletal muscle. Basal ganglia help coordinate slow skull movement and suppresses useless pattern of movement. Thalamus relays sensory information from the spinal cord and certain part of the brain, which is the cerebral cortex. Hypothalamus control various homeostatic functions, which is the body, temperature, respiration, and heartbeat. Cerebellum coordinates some conscious movement in the muscles and balance. Brainstem play a role in consciousness and transmit impulses between brain and spinal cord. So this is the part of the adult brain. We have here the cerebrum, cerebral cortex, the thalamus, corpus callosum, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pons, reticular activating system, medulla, and the cerebellum. Protective covering. The cranial meninges are continuous with the spinal meninges and mirror their structure and function. In the brain, extension of the dura mater form hard, non-compliant members that are divided in the intracranial bolt in various ways. The three important dura extensions are the falx cerebri and the falx cerebelli and the tentorium cerebelli. So the tentorium cerebelli has two components, which is the supratentorium and the infratentorium. The falx cerebri is a strong silk-shaped fold of the dura mater which descends vertically in a longitudinal fissure and separates the two cerebral hemispheres. The falx cerebelli is the small triangular process that separates the two cerebellar hemispheres. The tentorium cerebelli is important because brain tumors are often characterized as supratentorium, which is above the tentorium, and the infratentorium, which is the below tentorium. So, we have here the pictures. The superior sagittal sinus, the skin, the parietal bone, the dura, the pia mater, cerebral cortex, falx cerebri. We have here the arachnoid mater, arachnoid pilus, subarachnoid space. So in the skin, here we have the frontal plane. The blood supply of the brain. The brain is only about 2% of the total body weight in humans. It receives 15 to 20% of the body blood supply. The food and oxygen are carried to the brain by many blood vessels. It is found in the brain and deep within the brain. The blood vessel entered the brain through holes in the skull called foramina. The internal carotid arteries supply blood to the brain and posterior blood supply via the vertebral arteries. So this is the chart of the brain, the body weight, and its total blood. Brain blood flow. The internal carotid arteries supply oxygenated blood to crucial structures such as the brain and eyes. The external carotid artery supplies all the structure of the head and neck area, including the central nervous system and optic nerve in general. The common carotid artery provides the main blood supply to the head and neck. The carotid arteries are the primary vessels supplying blood to the brain and face. So this is the internal carotid, the external carotid artery, and the common carotid artery. Next is the cerebrospinal fluid. It's a clear fluid that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. It cushions the brain and spinal cord from injury and also serves as a nutrient delivery and waste removal system for the brain. We have the lateral ventricle here, the brain, the third ventricle, the dura mater, the subarachnoid space with cerebral fluid, the fourth ventricle, the spinal cord, the brain, the subaoronic space with cerebral fluid, the pia mater, the dura mater, the bone, the mucosa, and the sphenoid sinus. So, cerebral fluid leak. Cerebral fluid leak occur when the cerebral spinal fluid escapes through a small tear or hole in the outermost layer of connective tissue called the dura mater that surround the brain and spinal cord and hold in the cerebrospinal fluid. Anyone can get a cerebrospinal fluid leak. The woman, the Ehlers-Danlos and Marfan syndrome, and people who are obese or have high blood pressure. Now let's move on to the central nervous system, the brain region. Brainstem. All message transmitted between the brain and spinal cord. Medulla also control the heartbeat, rate of breathing, coordinate swallowing, vomiting, hiccuping, coughing, and sneezing. We have the component here. The pons, which is the breath, it conducts message between the spinal cord and the rest of the brain. The spinal cord known as a midbrain. We have here the brain stem. This is the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla. Next one is the encephalon. Lies above the brainstem and embodies the thalamus and hypothalamus. Thalamus is important relay station for the sensory information, interpreting sound, smell, taste, pain, pressure, temperature, and touch. The hypothalamus controls a number of functions, which are the heartbeat, body function, and the digestion. We have here the picture of the encephalon, the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the pituitary gland. Cerebrum. The cerebrum is the uppermost part of the brain. It contains two hemispheres split by a central fissure. We have the left brain and the right brain. The left brain, it controls the right side of the body and vice versa. The right side of the brain, on the other hand, it's more concerned with imagination, art, symbols, and spatial relations. This is the cerebrum, the pons, and the cerebellum. Cerebellum. It is located below the cerebrum. It has an important role in motor control, with cerebellar dysfunction often presenting with motor signs. In particular, it is active in coordination, precision, timing of the movement, as well as in motor learning. As you can see the pictures, this is the cerebellum.